I don't know how long I've been here. I've forgotten how I even got here in the first place. All I know is, if I don't leave soon, I'm going to die. When I first arrived here, or rather, when I was first aware of being here, it seemed like a paradise. A veritable Garden of Eden, complete with trees full of fruit. Although not any sort of fruit I'd ever seen before. And I suppose full of fruit isn't exactly true, since each tree only ever seemed to produce one fruit. But it was a massive one. They were easily the size of one of those award-winning pumpkins at county fairs, each tree being heavily weighed down by its signature produce, to the point where their trunks seemed ready to snap right in half if the bulbous, dull yellow orbs gained even the slightest bit more mass. The trees reminded me of bent, crooked old men, doubled over with the immense weight of their unwieldy yield. That wasn't the strangest aspect of them, however. Fruit itself also gave off a faint glow, though one that was seemingly only visible at night. Now, I'm aware of bioluminescent fungus, but plant life was a new one to me. The immense hunger I felt the moment I awoke on these rough, rocky shores overrode any trepidation I had as a result of the fruit's quirks. And before I was even consciously aware of what I was doing, I found myself near neck deep in the guts of the nearest tree's engorged offspring. It was delightful, to say the absolute least. I don't think I've ever tasted such an oddly equal mix of sweet and savory, but somehow it worked. Almost too well. I couldn't actually stop myself from eating. I didn't want to stop myself. Even realizing the growing fullness in my slowly distending abdomen wasn't enough to sate or even slow my ravenous appetite. The taste was wonderful, but the feeling was nothing short of divine. Each bite sent waves of pure euphoria tickling down my spine. As I finished the last few morsels, finding nothing even resembling a seed or pit, I first sat back, and then laid back, and then finally drifted off into restful slumber. As soothing as the sleep was, it wasn't entirely untroubled. Plagued by dreams of tumultuous waves crashing against stalwart stone, golden lights glistening through murky fog, and an unfamiliar but distressing feeling that I can only describe as being squeezed from all sides at once, I woke with a start, and immediately felt that same hunger consume me once more. I thought of nothing but finding another tree and its swollen bounty. A desperate, grasping search around the beach left me fruitless. So I turned towards the only other area there was. Inland. And somehow, though I was sure my eyes had scanned greedily along the entire visible landscape, I could now clearly see the dim glow of my prize, far enough into the island's vegetation to make me question if it was simply a mirage, but not far enough to prevent me from walking, and then running, and then sprinting towards my soon-to-be harvest. This one was much the same, including the voracious gluttony, the tangible swelling of my stomach, and my spontaneous collapse into harrowing unconsciousness afterwards. My life soon became a seemingly endless hunt for the seductive gleam of these self-destructive orbs. I'd awaken, instantly start my search for the next, with no sense of how time had passed, how far inland I had now gotten, or anything else at all, really. Only my loathsome piggishness mattered, and that descriptor didn't just apply to my appetite anymore. If there was anything else I was still alert to, it was my own rapidly increasing weight, and that was only because I was painfully aware of just how exponentially long it was taking for me to arrive at my next meal. The fruit was everything to me. I hardly even stopped feeding to breathe after a certain point, ending each grubby meal gasping and wheezing before passing out and continuing the aerobic cycle anew. Soon, I began to realize my path of devourance was becoming tiresome. Not in terms of appetite, no, that was stronger than ever, and not simply because of my ever-expanding girth either, though it was a wonder I could even keep stumbling ahead without toppling over. Instead, gravity seemed to be working against me. It took me longer than I'd like to admit in my overfed stupor that this was because the increasingly sparse trees had begun slowly leading me uphill. Not just uphill, but up a mountain. Looking ahead now yielded nothing but grayish, crumbly dirt, but raising my eyes revealed an upward slope that seemed to reach into the clouds. I had forgotten about clouds. I don't think I'd even looked up at the sky once since first waking on the rugged beach. What I certainly hadn't forgotten about was my beloved fruit, which seemed to withdraw themselves to the highest visible point. So I kept moving forward. Quickly enough, my unsteady steps turned into even shakier crawling, my bulbous belly scraping along the ashy soil, threatening to spill my stuffed guts with every gash and slice. I hardly noticed. All I could think about was the oasis of treats awaiting me, ringing the summit like a radiant crown of pure ecstasy. What I found up there was no oasis. What found me up there was anything but pure. Grasping the rim of what I begun to assume to be an extinct volcano, hoisting myself up onto the edge in preparation of grabbing the nearest tree and sinking my teeth into its fruit without even removing it from its bough, a noise I can only properly describe as wet caught my attention, emanating from the chasm below. Maybe this volcano wasn't extinct. Maybe this volcano wasn't extinct. I hardly would have given it a second thought, happy to die in the throes of magma-induced immolation as long as it was with a mouthful of my precious ambrosia, had it not been for what my quick downwards glance caught. An eye. Monstrous, both in size and appearance, met my gaze. And it was taking no quick glance back up at me. It was glaring at me, straining up of what I had thought was simply a caldera, threatening to rise up out of it like an eruption itself, bulging veins and sickly yellow sclera practically vibrating in absolute want, need, something all too familiar. Hunger. It didn't dart around madly in its muddy socket. It was fully, completely, utterly transfixed on me. For some reason, this aspect is what triggered both my gag reflex and fight-or-flight response all at once. Seeing it stare at me with the same insatiable desire I'd found within myself towards my beloved fruits broke something in me, causing me to vomit directly into that hellish orbital cavity before careening backwards and tumbling, more so rolling, given my rotundity, back down the incline. The last thing I remember seeing is it blinking as my stomach acid splashed against its white and already panicked pupil. It actually blinked. And I've now made my way back to the beach where I first awoke. It's taken every last iota of willpower I have not to stop at any of the now rapidly regrown and much more intensely glowing globular. I think it, whatever it even is purposely tempting me. It wants me fat and immobile, ripe for consumption. The shoreline helped convince me that starvation was a better option. The rocky protrusions have raised considerably into tall, spindly, tightly packed spires, almost entirely blocking my view of the ocean. I'm trapped, and I'm going to die. But at least I'm making myself a more paltry meal this way. Hopefully I'll starve this abomination too in the process. The walk back cleared my mind, no doubt in part due to abstinence from my delectable drug. As a result, I realized I somehow still had my phone in my pocket, which had gone completely unnoticed in my former fruit-induced stupor. I know this place is useful for telling others about what not to do, so I figured I'd use my last bit of data connections to reach out to everyone. Anyone. I know it's pointless. It'll most likely immediately sink to the bottom of the endless ocean that is the internet and never be seen again. But if there's even the slightest chance that someone will see this, and I can help them avoid this terrible fate, I'm going to take it. A modern-day message in a bottle. But as a warning, not a cry for help. I think I've been sitting in the same spot for too long. I've begun sinking into the ground, probably aided by my still prodigious weight. It's the biggest understatement of my life, but I suppose I ate too much. During the first few nights that have now passed with me actually conscious, I swear I could see a pale glow emanating from my own torso. Which leads me to my final message, and the only one that really matters. Don't follow the lights. Thank you so much for making it to the end of this video. A quick shout out to my patrons, Old Penguin, Rinku Star, Melissa Perez, Icy Narrates, Seven Cities Journalist, Cupcake Hips, Eric Cifuentes, Alonso, Austin My Love, Ellie Hutmeyer, Jesse Hartley, Lawrence Wallen, Mr. Sankofa, and William Hartley. I always try to link a different charity in the description, so go ahead and check that out. I'm also going to start having more things on my Patreon soon, so keep your eyes peeled. And as always, I'd love to know how I can be praying for you, so go ahead and drop a comment and let me know how I can do that. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you in the next video.